Yes, sir. Well, here it comes. Oh, my goodness. Oh, wow. In your life, have you seen anything like that?
Block kick can go the other way, too. He's got to be careful and get it up.
On the way. No, return by Chris Davis. Davis goes left. Davis gets a block. Davis has another block. Chris Davis. No flags. Touchdown. Auburn. An answered prayer.
And we're back here on WCDB. The art of great play-by-play can be traced back to a simple concept: great storytelling. And no one can exemplify that more than our next guest, legendary play-by-play broadcaster Verne Lundquist. His new book, Play-by-Play, over a 50-year broadcasting career calling the wildest games in sports, from SEC football to college basketball, the Masters, and so much more. Verne, as someone who has admired you in your career so much from afar, it is an honor to have you on the show. You're in Austin, Texas right now, so all of us here in upstate New York are quite jealous. Verne, how are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing great, Rob. It's good to be talking with you. I've got not an intense association with Albany, but I've done a few events over the years in that great city.
Well, what do you remember most from Albany, Verne? I've got to know.
Well, it's funny. I just, knowing we were going to chat, I was reminiscing, and one of the more vivid memories I've got was a skating event, figure skating event that we held there. This would have been in the mid-'90s.
Figure skating?
A big part of my life. With the Olympics in 94 and 99, 92, 94, and 98. And we were doing an event. It was a judged event in February of whatever the year was. It would have been after Tanya and Nancy in 94. And I was flying on a plane from Chicago into Albany, and I was sitting across the aisle from Brian Boitano and Katerina Witt. So we had a men's figure skating gold medalist and a ladies figure skating gold medalist twice. And I'm across the aisle, and we're landing in a blizzard. And the guy made excellent pilot. He made the approach, and he said, "I know we can get in. The minimums are okay." And then he pulled up, and we went back around again. And I thought, I sure hope this ends well. and it obviously did. And then the next night, we were downtown getting ready to do the event, and this was, as so many figure skating events can be, a black tie thing. So we had to and I was working with Scott Hamilton, and we were at the arena getting dressed, and Scott realized he had left his tuxedo coat jacket back at the hotel. And you should have seen the scramble, because he's not a big guy. A matter of fact, 5'3" and 115. So most jackets were not going to fit him. But he had a blue sport coat back at the hotel, and we dispatched somebody driving through the snowstorm to hurry back, grab his blue coat. We'd pass it off as a tux, and they got back about 10 minutes before we had to start the show. So that was not a great memory, but I also did 2 or 3 basketball tournaments there, and enjoyed it every time. I really, really did.
It sounds like your experiences in Albany are a roller coaster ride, Verne.
Well, that's my career.
Without a doubt.
That's true for almost all of us. You hope for highlights. In my case, I've had more mountaintop experiences than valley experiences, but we've all had moments of setback, and you deal with that, and you put your head down, and you go on to the next day and the next event, and hope it goes better.
Certainly true there, Verne. Let's go back to the book. Play-by-play, putting over a 50-year broadcasting career into words. First off, what was the motivation to write the book?
Well, I started my career in sports television began on Labor Day of 1963. So over the course of a lot of local telecasts, 19 years as a matter of fact, over 16 years as the play-by-play guy for the Dallas Cowboys, and then beginning in 74, 36, more than that, 46 years of network television. A lot of stories have erupted, and I consider myself more of a storyteller than anything else. I mean, you have to get the facts right. You have to get the down, if it's football, down distance, players involved. But more significantly, I want to give the viewer or the listener a reason to care about what happens at the event. And you do that, in my view, by telling stories, by either negative or positive about the individuals involved, but they suddenly have reason to care about what the final outcome will be, an interest in it. And you do that, I think, by storytelling. So I've done that for a lot of years, and probably 3 years ago, I was at our March Madness basketball seminar in New York, and that's everybody involved, production, front office, and on-the-air people. We meet for 3 days in New York City, and it's an agenda that includes what we're going to do, how we're going to do it. And we had a media session. And after that was concluded, I found myself in a circle of 5 or 6 guys, and I found myself telling stories, and they laughed. And one of the guys said, "You know what? You've got enough. You should write a book." So that was the genesis of it. And the guy who's represented me since '83 had a literary arm in his business. So we put together a proposal, shopped it around the various publishing houses in New York, and one of the better ones, HarperCollins, accepted the proposal, and that began the relationship. And it was a much, much more involved procedure than I'd ever expected. But we got the book finished in May, and publishing date was October 16th. And so now, since October the 4th, I've been pretty much on a steady publicity diet. I didn't know what this involved, but it's been enjoyable, especially I get to talk with folks like you around the country and hopefully sell a few books.
Really appreciate the kind words there. So you describe yourself as a storyteller, and you have so many stories over the course of your career. What was the biggest challenge in trying to condense all of these different memories that you have into one book?
Well, it was, and I'm a storyteller, but I'm not a note taker. Now, so I didn't have a journal. I had Nancy, my wife, who's been along for most of this journey, and we had, in the process of doing what I do, a lot of these events or these stories had remained in my mind, and I just needed to be jarred, mostly by Nance, but also by the editor. And we had an editor in New York named Matt Harper. He was not associated with the founders of the company, to my knowledge, but he's the guy who ultimately decided what went in and what went out. And that was a bit of a challenge because, and now in the process of doing these kind of conversations, something will trigger something else. And Matt even said to me, if this thing goes well, if it sells well, do you have enough for another book? And I said, yeah, I do. And so I'm even making notes now. I've learned that much in hopes that we come back and do a second one.
The book is play-by-play. Verne Lundquist with us here on WCDB, calling the wildest games in sports in bookstores now. Verne, the 50-year career, everything from SEC football, the Masters, the NCAA tournament. If I were to ask you what your favorite broadcasting moment of your career was, what do you think you would say?
Well, I get, just because I've been so fortunate, Rob, over the years to have had a number of moments that resonate with people. I've kind of ranked them. Not really. I mean, I don't have a written list to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I do get asked the question, where would you put thus and such? And they cover the gamut. I mean, I mentioned figure skating, and I was right in the middle of Tanya and Nancy in '94. But my default position has always been and still is 1986 when at the Masters, when I was lucky enough to be at the 17th hole, and Jack Nicklaus at the age of 46 against all odds stood over a ball at the 17th on the green, tied with Seve Ballesteros for the lead. And so if he made the putt, and it was not a straightforward attempt at all, had a little double breaker. But I was very conscious of the fact that if he made it, he was going to have the lead with one hole to play and two guys chasing him. And he made it and took the lead, and I was pretty simple in my response. I just said maybe, and then when the ball dropped in, I with considerably more emotion than I'm showing right now, I said, yes, sir. And the wonderful thing about my memory of that is that it was Jack. And I helped, I'm told, and I believe this, to enhance people's memory of that occasion. And he paid me the greatest compliment, I think, among the greatest I've ever had. My final year doing the SEC 2 years ago, my last game at Georgia was Tennessee at Georgia, and I spent all last week in Georgia doing this sort of thing, making speeches and book signings. And when I did my last game at Georgia, a dear friend of mine named Lauren Smith at the university had arranged for video statements on the scoreboard, and the last one of the guys who spoke was Jack, and he said on the video, well, in '86 I made the putt and he made the call, so we're going to be joined at the hip as long as they play golf. And when I heard him say that, it took my breath away. And then the band, at the request of my friend Lauren, and the band director, a guy named Mike Robinson, they arranged to go end zone to end zone. I was told, look down on the field, and they had spelled out, yes, sir. And then the public address announcer said, okay, let's give him a send-off. And I had 93,000 people look up at our broadcast booth and in unison yell, yes, sir. All of those reasons make that a memory that I'll treasure for the rest of my days.
Verne, I don't think many people are going to argue with you there, but it begs the follow-up question. If the Jack Nicklaus shot is number one, then where does Tiger at the 2005 Masters rank? Is it 1A for you?
Yes, that's exactly where I put it, 1A, because it was Tiger, and I know this to be true. The first guy was Jack, the second was Tiger, and without demeaning Chris DeMarco, his fellow competitor that Sunday, if Chris DeMarco had made that chip shot, we would have remembered it. But it wasn't Chris who made it. It was Tiger Woods. And it's part of his legacy. And because I made the right judgment of what I said, and honest to God, Rob, all I was doing was reacting to what I saw in front of me and reacting as if I were someone watching in the sports bar or in his or her living room by saying, "In your life, have you ever seen it?" Well, I never had, and I expected that most folks hadn't. So, because of the consequence of the men involved, that makes those two events so much more memorable. And then number 3 for me is a very close. I'd even make it 1B. It was the end of the Iron Bowl in 2013, when you've got a missed field goal from 57 yards out, returned 109 yards for a touchdown, and Auburn beats Alabama. So for foundational blocks, those are pretty good 3.
Now that's a hard 3 to beat. It really is. Running out of time here. Really do appreciate it. Feel like we could talk to you for hours, but before we let you go, for a young broadcaster who looks up to you so much and everything that you've accomplished in your career, what advice would you give them?
Well, I've got two things I would say. Never turn anything down. You'll learn something from it. And I use as an example something in my own life. I had a dear friend who gave me that advice. He was a colleague and a mentor. His name was Frank Lieber, and Frank died in '85 at the age of 51. And he had done the 17th hole for CBS at Augusta from 68 to 85. And he's the one who said to me once, if they ask you to do it, learn the rules, learn the jargon, watch all the videotape you can, and then go about it aggressively, but don't say no. So that's number 1. And I understand that you've got to be given the opportunity first. But if you are given that, accept it joyfully, learn as much as you can, and then approach it in a very positive way. The other thing, and not enough of us, and I include myself in this, is we don't follow this rule often enough. Be brief. And the best announcer at keeping it simple ever, in my view, was a fellow that young people wouldn't know now, but his name was Ray Scott. He was a legend in the 60s as the voice of the Green Bay Packers for CBS. And this is when Lombardi was there, and Bart Starr was the quarterback, and they beat the Cowboys in the Ice Bowl on a daring play. And here's a typical Bart. Boyd Dowler was a great wide receiver for that team. And here's a typical Ray Scott description of Green Bay touchdown. Starr, Dowler, touchdown. You can see what was going on in the field, so he ID'd the players. We all need to do more of that.
Verne, thank you so much for the time. The new book, Play-by-Play, Calling the Wildest Games in Sports, in bookstores now. Verne, this was fun. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you. A great pleasure. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Verne.